day 3 of Disciple Dojo's trip to Japan. After a wonderful breakfast buffet, and seriously, Japanese omelets, oh my gosh, those things are incredible. It was time to change hotels so that we could be closer to the Kodokan for tonight's training and Saturday's competition, where 3 of our guys would be competing for the first time. We also needed a hotel with on-site washers and dryers, both to wash our gis and training gear, as well as the 3 outfits per day that we were all sweating through. So we packed our bags, took an Uber to drop off our luggage at the second hotel, which was much smaller and far less swanky than our first one, but was right across the street from the Tokyo Dome, and most importantly, only 1 block down from the Kodokan. After leaving our bags in storage, we hopped on another not at all confusing train to the Asakusa station to meet TC's friends, Mariko and Jin. After wandering through some pristine back alleys in the noonday sun, and seriously, I had still not yet seen a single piece of trash in an alley the entire time so far, we finally made it to our rendezvous point, the famous Kaminari-mon, aka Thunder Gate. You've probably seen this in pictures, very popular tourist spot. This gate it's massive. It was originally built like back in 942 AD, and it was moved to its current location where it's been restored a couple of times because of various fire damages and wear and tear. Most recently, after 1960, it was renovated and refurbished thanks to donations from the founder of Panasonic. There's your trivia for the day. And so it now beckons thousands of people each day to the marketplace, which is lined with hundreds of shops all along the entrance to the famous Sensoji Temple. Now, the centerpiece of the gate is a massive lantern. This thing's huge, and it's got gigantic kanji on it that says Thunder Gate. And then standing on each side are these huge statues. One is of the god of thunder, and the other is the god of wind. And these are the deities that are traditionally associated with, like storms and therefore rain and fertility, but also protection from the storms, the thunder and the wind. And that's really important to ancient peoples on island cultures that were at the mercy of typhoons and earthquakes, which Japan was. After you passed the shops, there was a section in front of the temple, kind of off to the side, that had these beautiful rock garden memorials. Some were grave sites, some were memorials to various people. And it was really interesting to see this beauty and this kind of overt spirituality juxtaposed with crowds and commercialism and these good luck rituals that seemed more like fortune cookie or wishing well customs than actual religious devotion. Although I'm sure some people did take them very seriously, most of the people were just tourists kind of doing it for fun. Everything from burning sage to this thing where you put in a coin and shake out a chopstick, and then whatever number is on that chopstick, you open a drawer and pull out a fortune from that numbered drawer, and that's supposed to be your fortune for the day. I couldn't help but wonder how a devout adherent to Shintoism would view all of this. Like, would they see it as harmless cultural fun, or kind of a Shinto version of TV preachers selling prayer cloths and miracle water? It'd be an interesting conversation to have with like a monk or a priest sometime over tea. And I don't know, hopefully I'll get to go back and have a chance to do just that someday. But while we were there, I was also wrestling internally a little bit with how a Christian should approach such things. Like, would throwing a coin or drawing a chopstick, reading the accompanying fortune, would that be participating in actual pagan worship? Or would it be just a purely cultural way to have fun? Kind of like breaking open a fortune cookie here in America. We don't put any religious baggage into that. You just eat your food, and then you get a fortune cookie, you break it open, you read your fortune, you go about your day. And I could honestly see Christians taking both approaches, and I wasn't really sure where I landed on it all. I was a little uneasy about giving money to a temple, but it seemed more like visiting a museum or taking a cultural heritage tour than anything actually religious. And both of these things I wouldn't oppose paying to experience. So this was kind of this internal wrestling that was going on. But my teammates had already thrown in a coin on all of our behalf, and so it was my turn to shake out a chopstick and pull out my fortune. Well, when I did, it was a sheet of paper, and it literally said that I had got the worst fortune there was and would experience great lack. So what you're supposed to do if you get a bad fortune is there's this little stand where you tie the piece of paper to it, and all of the bad fortunes are there, and it's a way of sort of leaving your bad luck there at the temple. And I think later those are all collected and burned in some type of prayer ritual. I don't know. But I actually kept mine. I thought it was funny, and I would rather keep it as a cultural souvenir than put any actual faith in something that I know Jesus is ultimately Lord over, which is namely my fortune and life in this world. But honestly, the whole experience made me think of Acts 17. You know, that's where Paul visits Mars Hill in Athens, the Areopagus. Both at the Meiji Shrine the day before and at Sensoji Shrine, I could see, as I look around, a tremendous desire for and appreciation of the spiritual. You know, much like the Athenians in Acts 17, Japan is a very religious culture. Even if much of it's now seen as, you know, cultural rather than theological, there's still, you can tell there's a longing for the sublime and the divine, and it just seeps out into every aspect of society. And it's part of what makes Japanese aesthetic so absolutely beautiful. You know, I could look around and I could see echoes of God's common grace everywhere I turned. And it reminded me, in fact, of the discussion that I had here on the channel last year with my former professor, Sean McDonough, even right down to our talking about Studio Ghibli and the sense of innate beauty that Miyazaki is able to capture in his films. If you didn't see that episode, I'll put a link to it in the video description below. Check it out. We had a great discussion, and I was thinking a lot about that while walking around this beautiful setting in the middle of Tokyo. So then after that, we went over and grabbed a delicious lunch at a very traditional sukiyaki restaurant. Along the way, we passed a number of shops, which had everything from inexplicably luchador artwork to a reggae Bob Marley bar that I had to get a picture of, and which I sent to my good friend Richard Middleton, my favorite Jamaican by far. So then we headed back to catch the train to Akihabara station. And thanks to the architecture of the train's station steps, we were able to count our calories burned along the way. So, you know, there's a reason why pretty much the only obese people you will ever see in Japan are sumo wrestlers. They are burning calories, walking steps, eating healthy. Another thing that we could definitely benefit from.
That's how it encourages you to burn off all the sukiyaki you just ate at the restaurant.
Well, here we are headed to Akihabara right now. Amazing Japanese invention are the walk signals for the traffic. They not only tell you when to go and when to stop, but they give you a timer. It tells you how much time before the traffic signal is about to change. Super interesting, and we need to get that in America. Very helpful. So you want to be on YouTube? So hello, Mariko. It's our translator and our guide and her husband Jin, and they took us around to eat, and now we are headed. You've never been to Akihabara?
No.
First time. I'm a pro. No, I've never been either, so yeah. And then after this, we're gonna head and train judo tonight at the Kodokan. So we have to check into our hotel first, and I need to shower because I'm so sweaty. Tokyo is so hot in September. Akihabara, here we come. For only 100 yen, you can play Street Fighter 2.
Oh my gosh.
Boom. On an alleyway corner in Japan, just on an alley. So everywhere, if you know anything about Japan, you know the vending machines and like capsule machines. So these are capsule machines where you just buy toys with coins. So all of these are capsules, but they're legit. Like that's Gundam, and this is more Gundam. I don't recognize a lot of these. I recognize Mario. and Kirby, but just a whole alleyway of vending machines, and even like ridiculously,
These
like
are
models.
famous Japanese singers.
Oh, they don't look like. But when we got to Akihabara, we only had a few minutes to look around, so we didn't get to see much. And for those of you who don't know, Akihabara is seen as kind of like nerd central of Japan. You know, from anime and manga to electronics to vintage video games, pop culture. Akihabara is something of a mecca for otaku or weeb culture. If you don't know what any of that means, you click on pretty much any anime channel here on YouTube and you can go headlong down the endless rabbit hole that is Japanese pop culture. But I ended up finding a book with the artwork from my absolute favorite animated film of all time, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. It was a no-brainer purchase as soon as I saw this. This Miyazaki's artwork has influenced me ever since I was in high school. And so it was really cool to be able to pick up this art book, which is now sitting right here across from me on the shelf here at Disciple Dojo. But other than that, I didn't do any shopping, because by that point, it was time for us to head to our next destination, the Owl Cafe. Yep, the Owl Cafe. Now, it's not actually a cafe. It's just a place where you come in from the heat, sit down quietly, relax, and spend 45 minutes hanging out with a few dozen owls. Yeah, that's literally all it is. The owners are a husband and wife couple that raise owls, and they wanted to open a business, a place where people could come and experience these amazing apex predators in a way that was interactive and that would give people appreciation for these animals. It was awesome. You know, I spent most of the time just sitting there chilling with my buddy Omega, and by the end, you know, we had bonded. We'd bonded big time. So we just left the Owl Cafe. I mean, they probably have like 30 owls in there, and they all have different names, they all have different personalities. And so you just look at the owls, you go around, you meet each one, you know, just, they look at you look at them, because that's what owls do. And then you say, oh, I'd like to hold Mr. Potato. And they'll get Mr. Potato, and they'll sit him on your arm, and you'll just hang out with Mr. Potato, or whichever one you choose. They had fun names. It was awesome. It wasn't like the animals were really well cared for, and they weren't harassed. if I were to be an owl, I would want to be an owl in the Owl Cafe. It wasn't very busy. You're not like all these people with like sticking cameras in their faces and flashing or anything like that. So as somebody that really, cares about animals and their welfare and not a fan of a lot of animal exhibits, I was a little bit skeptical of this to see what it was gonna be like, but I was impressed with how much they care for these owls and how you just get to kind of enter into their world for 45 minutes and befriend an owl. So it was very cool. So after the Owl Cafe, we bid farewell to Jen and Marco, and we headed back to the hotel to get ready for the open training session at the Kodokan that evening. For those who don't know, the Kodokan is the international headquarters of judo, and it is, to my knowledge, the largest dojo in the world. So of course, Disciple Dojo is going to have to go visit the largest dojo. 8 floors. It's 8 floors of judo. Hundreds of students from all over the world coming and going. It was unbelievably impressive. And like everything in Japan, unbelievably clean and well maintained. So we headed to the front desk to check in. TC and I had to rent gis to train in. I had my jiu-jitsu gi, but only judo gis are allowed. So I had to rent one, but they were super cheap. And then it was off to the locker room to change. And for me to put on a white belt for the first time in about 15 years or so. I actually love the feeling of wearing a white belt. I'm a first degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have another black belt in another martial art, but I've never taken a single judo class in my life. All the judo I know is adapted from BJJ or Sambo. So I wanted to learn as much of the traditional ways of the Kodokan as I was able. And mainly to be a better teacher, when I'm teaching takedowns and throws, to be able to better articulate the difference between what I'm showing and how I do it versus what is orthodox or correct judo. So one of the black belts there, a guy named Tommy, he was originally from New York, but he'd been in Japan for decades and been training at the Kodokan for a long, long time. He came over and welcomed us. And during this opening drilling session, he worked with me, giving me some basic pointers on how they do various throws, as well as some of the overall etiquette of the Kodokan. And there is so much etiquette. It's pretty much the polar opposite of the vibe at Imanari's a couple of days before. And that's fairly representative of the difference between judo, with its heavily Japanese-influenced culture, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, with its heavily Brazilian-influenced culture. Everything in judo is formal, hierarchical, and ceremonial, whereas everything in BJJ is laid back, informal, and practical. But here's the thing, I love both of them. I think they bring needed balance to one another. But since I wasn't competing in that Saturday's upcoming event, and since I was only a white belt, I wasn't allowed to participate in the randori later that evening. Randori is kind of the live training where you're actually trying to practice and execute throws. I just was low man on the totem pole on this trip, and they don't know me. None of the Kodokan instructors knew me, and my jiu-jitsu black belt doesn't really mean anything there. And honestly, given how tired I was and how sore my back was at that point, I actually didn't mind. I got to sit and watch all of the various judoka, from the beginning students to literal Olympic medalists, throwing each other around and training. The entire mat at the Kodokan on the main floor is suspended with some kind of shock absorbers. And so every throw would literally shake the floor, which of course sounds way cooler than when you just throw somebody regularly. After training, we met up over at a British pub right in Tokyo Dome, across from our hotel, to grab dinner with Tommy. And while we were there was a baseball game on, and people were heavily invested. This is literally right beside the stadium, but it was an away game. But I learned something about the history of baseball in Japan. It goes back way further than I thought. I thought it was just a post-World War II thing, but Tommy was telling me, no, baseball in Japan has been big for a long time. But anyway, by that time, my jet lag still hadn't gone away completely, and I was ready to call it a night. So I bid the team good evening and headed back across the street to our hotel. But along the way, I stopped by Don Quijote. So we just got done training at the Kodokan, the where judo, the birthplace of judo and the sort of international headquarters. And it was really cool. I put on a white belt because I'm not ranked in judo. I know some judo throws and techniques, and I have a lot of grappling experience, but all of my experience has been in jiu-jitsu and in martial art, like mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, self-defense setting. So going and being able to work out with one of the black belts, Tommy, here at the Kodokan, he was very helpful. Showed me some of the orthodox judo teachings and how they do things, which is different than how I learned. And it was great. Honestly, putting on a white belt and walking into the Kodokan, not as a black belt, was awesome because I could just soak up stuff. I didn't have to worry about knowing anything. I could just start over, and it was great. It's something that I really recommend if you are a martial artist and you're a black belt in your style, whatever style that is. Do a different style, start over, put on a white belt, and just learn, just take it in. It was a great experience. I didn't train much. I didn't do randori. I just drilled a few things, asked some questions. I got some pointers on some minor details. But to me, it was important because I wanted to know when I teach any technique, lights turning green, we're gonna walk. When I teach a technique now, and that comes from judo, I wanna be able to say, hey, this is the way I do this technique and my modification of it for jiu-jitsu or for self-defense, but it's not the technical correct judo way. There is a more orthodox way. So it's just, for me, it's helpful as a teacher to be able to differentiate what I'm showing and not passing it off as judo if it's a modified version. I appreciate it. So it's a very cool experience. Tomorrow's a free day. We're just going to, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna walk around here some. I'm gonna check out a couple of stores. I was able to go to, at Akihabara, I found a store that had some Studio Ghibli stuff and actually got The Art of Nausicaa, which is my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, but definitely my favorite animated movie. So it's cool getting the art book from my favorite drawn movie. So I'm just gonna walk around and check out some stuff. And then do laundry. And tomorrow we're gonna go to the Kodokan. They have a museum and get a little bit of the history of judo. But I'm also hoping to ride the roller coaster on the top of the building right across from our hotel. We're staying right here below Don Quijote. It's just, Tokyo's cool. Visit Tokyo if you get a chance. And one of the things you notice too is this is the most, largest urban area in the world. I can count on one hand the number of pieces of trash I've seen on the streets. The subways, immaculately clean. It's the complete opposite from places that I've been, like New York or India. Complete opposite. And the amount of care people take in the public spaces here, that's a part of Japanese culture that I think needs to rub off on the rest of the world. There are some other things that I think would be great, and then there's some other things I think Japan needs to take note of. But in terms of cleanness and consideration of other people who you're on this island, the other millions of people that you're on this small island with, that's one of the coolest things that I like about it. So like you can see, this is the street. There's no puddles of strange smelling goo. There's no, I don't walk through like a cloud of like, oh, it smells like somebody just peed here, like you do in New York or, big cities in America, even in places in Charlotte. So that's the biggest thing I notice about Tokyo in terms of differences, just for an urban area. It's super clean. So anyway, I'm rambling. I don't know if any of this will be shared with anybody, but those are my thoughts. So we'll check back in tomorrow. All right, we're calling it a night. Now, if you don't know what Don Quijote is, and most of you probably don't, imagine that Dollar General and Target had a Japanese penguin-themed baby. That is Don Quixote. I found my second souvenir of the trip back in the houseware section. This awesome cat bus bathroom rug. This is from the movie My Neighbor Totoro, which if you haven't seen it, it's an absolute delight of a film for all ages. Seriously, go watch it. It is wonderful. And I was super tempted to grab this pair of Don Pin Crocs. Don Pin is the Don Quixote mascot. It's short for Don Quixote Penguin. And these Crocs were just amazingly tacky. And looking back, I totally should have got them because they were just my size. I also came across something called nose mints. Had no idea what those are, but the display made me chuckle, so I had to snap a picture. I could have spent hours in there, honestly, but alas, I settled for a Kinnikuman action figure from the little gotcha ball machine up by the register, grabbed some more grape tea and rice balls, and headed back for a nice hot bath and the joy of the Japanese toilet experience in my hotel room. It was a good day for sure, but we still had so much more to see and do. So stay tuned for that in the next episode. Oh, and I never figured out what nose mints are, by the way. So if you do know, let me know in the comment section below. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you back here next time for the third part of Disciple Dojo Visits Japan.